Welcome to Highline Excel class number 2. Hey, if you want to download this workbook, go to my YouTube channel and click on my college website link and you can download this. Those of you that are enrolled in this class, just go to our week 1 website. Hey, the next 4 or 5 sheet tabs have important information about formulas. We're going to basically do 3 weeks of basic Excel formula in 10 or 15 minutes here. Now, I have some information over here about definition of a formula. That's anything that starts with an equal sign. And then the types of things, cell references, operators, functions, text, ampersand, numbers, and even arrays that can go into formulas, and the different methods to enter formulas. So I want to show you an example of each one of those. The first one is, hey, here's sales and expense and net income. Equal sign is the character that tells Excel this is a formula. And I'm going to put a cell reference. Now, you can take your cursor and click like that. And then I'm going to type an operator, a minus sign. And then instead of using my mouse, I'm going to use my up arrow key. Right? And so that's the formula. It has an equal sign, a cell reference, and an operator. All right, so net income was a loss. Now, that's a formula. We're going to do a formula here, but we're going to use a built-in function, the sum function. The keyboard shortcut for auto sum is Alt equals. Notice there still fits the definition of a formula, equal sign, first character in the cell. It's got a built-in function, sum, and then in parentheses it has its arguments, which means the elements that the function used to calculate. Notice this is a range, B5 all the way to B7. Now I'm going to hit Enter. So that was a formula with a built-in function. Now let's do another type of formula. We're going to use a text formula, equals, and I'm going to get this cell reference right here. And then I'm going to use the ampersand. This is the join symbol, almost as important as the equal sign, because lots of times we want to join things together. So ampersand, and since we want is the total, I'm going to put that in quotes. Text in formulas has to be in quotes. Is the total. Now, spell check doesn't work after you hit Enter. Spell check will not spell check those words. So I'm going to click back here and hit F2, which is the edit key. If you're going to spell check, you got to do it while you're in edit mode, which means F7, and then it would go ahead and spell check. Enter, enter, enter. All right, now we're going to do a formula to calculate monthly rate. Equal sign, we're going to get a cell reference, an operator, the division operator, and watch this. We're going to type a number into a formula. The only time you type numbers into formulas is when they don't change. The number of months in 1 year doesn't change, so it's okay to hard code that into your formula. Whereas we used a cell reference and put this number there because rates change all the time. That is an unbelievably important rule that many people totally ignore as they build spreadsheets. And then what happens? It's hard to update all of your formulas if you have things like interest rates hard-coded into your formula. That is a great formula. When you take a test from me and you do a formula like that, you get lots of points. If you were to hard-code this in here, it would basically be worth nothing. Not efficient spreadsheet construction. All right, enter, enter, enter. Now I want to talk about, we talked about the elements. The only thing we didn't talk about was an array. We'll talk about that later, like week 9. But here I want to talk about different methods to enter your formula. All right, let's calculate the formula for monthly interest rate. I'm going to get that 18% divided by 12. Now watch this. I'm going to hit Enter. Enter. Oh, what happened? The formula went in the cell and the cursor went down. Let's try another one. Equals that 12% divided by 12 and then Enter. Okay? That's how most people enter their formulas, using Enter. But I want to show you 4 other methods and then 1 disastrous method. All right, this is, we're adding, so I'm going to Alt equals. And instead of hitting Enter, my goal is not to go down because I'm going to create some formulas, but I immediately need to either copy or format this cell. In our case, we're going to format. So instead of hitting Enter and then clicking back up or using your arrow key, when you're in edit mode, hit Control Enter. Notice we have one cell highlighted. If you have one cell highlighted, Control Enter says, hey, put the formula in the cell and keep that cell highlighted. Now, I can Control 1, which is the keyboard shortcut for format cells, Control 1. Go to number and add currency. And I want a symbol here, a $ symbol. Now I'm going to hit Enter, Enter, Enter. Now we're going to talk about tab. Tab, you can put a formula in. But now I'm going to show you the fatal mistake that many people make. And this is what not to do when entering a formula. So our formula here is just simply to calculate total units times the price per unit. Equals a cell reference, an operator multiply, and another cell reference. Now watch this. If you think you're going to be able to use your mouse to select over here and put that formula in, you're wrong. Because what happens when you're in edit mode, the arrow keys are converted to selecting cell references. Notice right here it says point mode. That means you can click and point and get your cell reference. Also, your arrow keys do the same thing. So that's why you do not want to use your arrow keys. It's one of the most common mistakes. You know, it works in Word when you have something highlighted and then you click over here, but not in Excel when you're making formulas. Now, you can use your F2 key to get into edit mode. Notice it went from edit to point, right? So now what does your cursor do? Oh, it moves through the formula. If you hit your F2 key, you get to enter. Then if you click right here, it does enter. But just don't use the arrow keys because so many formulas get wrecked when you use, now it's in edit. When I hit F2 again, it's in either enter or edit mode there. But the rule is don't use your cursor, right? Because you don't want to get all messed up. I'm going to hit tab because my goal is, when do you use tab to put a formula in? Oh, because my next formula is over here, so it's more efficient to go over here. So tab, tab. And then I'm going to do a formula for price equals the cost divided by 1 minus the markup on sales price. Don't worry about that right now. We're not talking about the math of it. We're just talking about how to enter formulas. So now I'm going to hit Enter because I want to go down. Enter, Enter, Enter. I'm going to come over here. Now I want to show you, if you start your formula here and your goal is to do another formula over here, we're not going to use Enter, Control, Enter, or Tab. We're going to type in equals, get this formula, divide by 1 minus the markup. And since our goal is to go this way, I'm going to use Shift Tab. Now, some of you that know Office applications know that Tab always moves to the left and Shift Tab always moves to the right. So it's easy if you know that from other applications or even websites where you move through text box. Tab goes to the left, Shift Tab goes to the, I'm sorry, that's reverse. Tab goes to the right and Shift Tab goes to the left. Well, when you're entering formulas, you can remember that Shift Tab goes to the left. All right, now I'm going to do my formula here, equals this times this. Hey, wait a second. I just did this in reverse order. I did this times this, where before I did this times this. Does that matter? No way, because multiplication is commutative. 1 times 2 is the same as 2 times 1. All right, I'm going to hit Enter. Now I've got to show you one other great thing, and this will help us later when we're making big spreadsheets. I want you to highlight all of the cells and notice that the active cell is right there. We're going to use Control Enter here, but first we're going to type something into the active cell. Excel is fun! Exclamation point. Now, we did Control Enter before, but we only had one cell highlighted. What happens if you do Control Enter and you have a bunch of cells highlighted? It's so cool. It populates. It's so cool. I'm getting choked up. It populates all the cells with whatever the thing is in the active cell. Control Enter. We'll use that a lot later when we get to big spreadsheets. One other important tip for entering formulas, let's do Alt equals to add. And we're going to use our keyboard shortcut Control Shift down arrow. Now, before, when we did this just last video, I hit Enter. But our goal is we want to put that formula in the cell and jump up one so we can see the label for the formula. Shift Enter puts the formula in the cell and moves up. So it put this formula in the cell and went up. And that's a convenient, especially when you have a huge spreadsheet and you're 500 rows down. Now let's go over to order of operations. We need to, again, this is basics. Here's the operators we use, parentheses, exponent, multiply, divide, plus, minus. Here's the order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. When you're doing math, you do everything in the parentheses first, then exponents, then all multiplication and division left to right, and then adding and subtracting left to right. Now, here's the really cool list. Here's Excel's order of operations. What? A colon? That's because sometimes there's a colon between ranges. A comma, we'll talk about that later, but you can have a union. So it starts with parentheses, colon, intersections, which we'll talk about when we get to lookup, on and on. Negation, here's some examples. Ooh, percents if you were silly enough to type a percent into a formula. Exponents. So all these things before it got to an exponent. All the way down to the bottom, it's a comparative symbols. Now let's see some examples of this. Now, what is 2 plus 3 times 12? All right, let's see if I can do this in my head. 2 plus 3 is 5, right? 2 plus 3, yeah, 5. And then 5 times 10 is 50, right? Well, let's see what Excel thinks. Equals 2 plus 3 times 10, right? 32. Uh-oh, that's because there's an order of operations. What it did is it did the multiplying first, which is 30, and then added the 2. Now, very important, we're going to learn about formula evaluator, formulas, formula auditing, evaluate formula. In 2003, this is on the tools menu. What it does is it will walk through how it calculates, and it does know the order of operations, or in fact, its order of calculating things. So I'm going to click evaluate. Notice it looked at that 2, and then it's going to look at that cell reference. Then it's going to look at that cell reference. The underline says multiplication first, and then finally we see that Excel gets it right. Now what happens if we do 2 plus 3 in parentheses times 10? Well then, hopefully I think we get 50. Equals in parentheses 2 plus 3, close parentheses, times this right here. And we get 50. Now let's look at another example. 2 minus 3 is greater than 10. Is that true or false? Well, 2 minus 3 is -1. Is -1 greater than 10? No, it should be false, right? Watch this. This is a true-false formula. 2 minus 3, and then the greater than symbol, and greater than 10. No way, you're allowed to do that? Yeah, it's a true-false formula. It only can do one of two things. It can only come out true or false. Oh, false. Now, what if I were to change this to 20? What is it going to do? Oh, look, now it's 20 minus 3. Is that greater than 10? Yeah, that is, in fact, true. Let's go ahead and go to Formula Evaluator for this. 20 minus 3, it knows to do that first, and that's going to look there. Finally, see that comparative operator comes last. True. All right, now the if function, which we briefly talked about in beginning Excel, equals if. Oh, and what does the if function need? It needs a logical test just like that. So we're going to say, is 10 greater than 3? And there's our logical test. We just saw that they only come out true or false. And the rest of the if is easy. Hey, what do you want me to put in the cell if it's true? What do you want me to put in the cell if it's false? Comma, and I'm going to put correct for the true, and then comma, and watch the screen tip jump. And the bold says, hey, now put the false into the formula. Incorrect. Close parentheses. So if 10 is greater than 3, then we're going to have correct. Control Enter. It is correct. Now, what if I put 20 here? Is 10 greater than 20? No. We could have just done this and it will put true or false, but the if lets us put these two things, correct or incorrect. So because 10 is not greater than 20, it puts incorrect. Let's do Formula Evaluator, Alt, there it is. If, and we're going to click Evaluate. Notice it's evaluating that true, false first because it has to. It doesn't know whether to put this one or this one, true or false. If Finally, it says, ooh, that's false. So now it's going to evaluate the whole thing and put the value if false, which is our incorrect. Now, let's go over to our built-in functions. There are functions built in which are formulas. Alt equals the sum function adds. Average equals AV. And in 2007, when this pops up, if you see the one you want, you can click on it with your mouse. Or you can type equals AV and down arrow to get to the average. When you select it either with your mouse or your down arrow, hit Tab. Another way is if you use a function a lot, watch this. AV, there's still a whole list. E, there's still a whole list. R, all of a sudden that one comes up to the top. So after doing that 10 or 20 times, you're like, I'm tired of selecting it. I just blindly type AVER and Tab, and there it is. And then I'm going to click here, click right there, and highlight. Close parentheses. In fact, with a simple function like this, you don't even need to put that parentheses. I'm going to Control Enter, and you can see up here that it did put it for me. Now, some other functions. What about future value? You have a yearly contribution, an annual rate, and years that you invested. So we want to try and find a function. Well, I don't really know what the function is, so I'm going to click this button, Insert Function. That's the F of X button. And I'm going to type future value. I want to find the future value of my pension, and click Go. Now, the way this works is you select one of these and then read the description. I'm going to start at the top. Returns the future value of investment based on periodic constant payments and a constant interest rate. Hey, those look good to me. Future value schedule returns the future value of an initial principal after applying a series of compound interest rates, known out for us NPER. That returns the number of periods. We'll talk about a lot of these functions later in the class. But future value, that's the one we want, and click OK. What's nice about the functions argument dialog box is these arguments here, since there can be a lot of them, have a description down here. So rate is the interest rate per period. OK, so for us it's annual, so it's annual. So I'm going to click this to collapse, and then I'm going to get our annual rate, and then uncollapse. I'm going to hit Tab, the NPER, and you can actually scoot this out of the way. NPER is the total number of periods, so I'm going to click there, and Tab. The payment. Oh, we have a payment, but watch this. When you pay out $4,000, that's a minus. It's going out of your wallet, so we're going to put a minus here. Now, here's something important. See these ones in bold? These mean they're absolutely mandatory for this future value function to work. If they're not in bold, that means that they are optional. Now, in a finance class, and later in this class, we'll talk about both of these. Another important feature is it shows you a preview over here, and it shows you the result here and here. If you need help on this function, like it's a function you've never used, or you're in the middle of a test, or you're trying to do something for your boss at work and you forgot how to use it, click on this help. Oh, there's some great examples in this. I'm going to click OK. And it looks like we'll have, under our assumptions, $483,199 when we retire. Now, what about this right here? I want to actually put a label. Again, we're going to use the ampersand. So I'm going to say equals, and in quotes, at retirement, I will have, end quote. I'm going to hit F7 because I'm such a bad speller. And then I'm going to use the ampersand. And now, if I click on this right here, watch what happens. Ooh, yuck. That's an unrounded number. That's because there's format there. Now, in the beginning Excel, we talked about format. And we'll talk about it coming up in our another video. But that's hiding all those decimals. So in this label, I want to be able to, I'm going to hit F2. I'm going to use the dollar function, DO dollar. Notice all I had to do there was type, because I use this all the time, DO. I know as soon as I type DO that it's bold, so I hit Tab, and there it is. The dollar function does one thing. It takes unrounded numbers. It rounds them, in our case by default, to 2 decimals, and applies a currency format for a text formula. That's it. That's what the dollar function does. So it looks like we have our label there. Now, what if we change this to 4%? Notice not only does our future value function, but also our label here changes. Now, I'm going to scoot this back here. VLOOKUP. This is something we briefly talked about in basics. We'll talk about this in great detail in this class, but this is just a little brush up on the basics. Here's your score for the class. And down here is your table. Whoops. Guess I can't quite fit this on. Oh, I'll leave that there. Our table. Here's your score, and in this cell you want your grade. Well, here's how it works. You have a table. It starts at small and gets bigger, ascending. As soon as here's your 85.5. You look at this in your brain. You keep it in your brain. You go over here. You keep racing down the column. Let me see if I can change the width here so we can see the whole thing. So there's your score, and we want our grade here. You put this in your brain. You go racing down this column. As soon as you hit a value bigger than yours, you have to jump back here, right? This is just doing it by hand. You say, OK, so the grade is over here. This is the column, the first column where we look up our value. We have this. We're looking it up. We've decided it's this row. So then you jump over to the third column here. This is 1, 2, 3. That is your grade. The B we want to put back in here. So if I did that, all of that by hand, then I'd have to spend a lot of time. Luckily, there's a function that will do it. Equals VLOOKUP. Notice equals VL. Once you get the hang of knowing what functions you use, I know that that's bold, so I simply hit Tab. Lookup value, that's what we want to look at. That's what we're looking at to determine what the grade is. Now, comma, notice VLOOKUP, it's bold. It reminds you that you need a comma. I'm going to type comma. The table, where is the table that we're looking up? Oh, this whole table right here. So I highlight the whole thing. Remember, for VLOOKUP, you want this assorted from smallest to biggest. Column 1, 2, 3. So then I hit comma, and now it says, where in the world is the grade? Where's the column index? Because right now it doesn't know whether to take it from this one, or this one. We actually want to take it from the third column, so we have to put a number 3. Comma, do we want an approximate match or an exact match? You use exact match when you have words that you're looking up. But here, notice that's 85.5. We don't have an exact match, but we still want to return this row. So I'm going to put not true. I'm going to put 1. In this class, we will put 1 for true and 0 for false. Close parentheses and Control-Enter. It got to be. Now, let's check it. Let's change this to 60. Oh, bummer. We got a D. Notice it started here. It went until it tried to find a bigger one. The bigger one is 75, so it jumped back to this. So technically, for this category, here's a description. And this is how VLOOKUP with a 1 works. With a 1 right there. Greater than or equal to 60, but less than 75. So it's always greater than or equal to this. So it can be equal to this or greater, but it has to be less than the next one. And so it returned a D. What's another function that we saw in Excel Basics? We saw how to do an if, which we already briefly talked about. Here we want to check the balance. So I'm going to say equals if, and what is the logical test? Oh, in accounting, we say are debits equal to credits. Notice a cell reference and a cell reference and a comparative operator. That's the logical test. Notice if you're asking, is this equal to this? What are the two answers? There's only 2, true and false. Comma, what do we want to put in the cell? If it's true, we want to say in balance. Comma, notice how the screen tip is polite. It jumps to the next one and says, hey, what do you want to put in the cell? It's reminding you. Ooh, I can't spell. It's reminding you right here. Hey, what do you want in the cell if it's false? I'm going to put not in balance. Be careful. At least I have to be careful since I'm such a bad typer. Because once you hit Control-Enter, spell check won't get it. So what we did, true, false, what to put in the cell of true, what to put in the cell of false. All right, why in the world does it say not in balance? Oh, well, there it is. It's not in balance. Hit the F9 key, because I have this set up to randomize. Notice we have 1163 and 1160. Why does it say not in balance? Oh, that sure looks in balance. It looks in balance, looks in balance. Oh, there, that one's, OK, so that makes sense. Hey, guess what? It's formatting. If you increase the decimals on all this, home, and then increase the decimals, you can see that formatting was tricking us. This is an an unrounded number here with a 591, whereas here it just says 1.59. So what? Let's just check this to make sure. Let's go ahead and I'm going to copy these, Control C. I'm going to highlight this whole range here. And guess what? I'm going to go up to Home and Paste. And there's a Paste Special right there. And I want to say Paste Values, and then click OK. Now we can see that they're both the same with the decimals expanded. I'm going to click Escape to turn off those dancing ants. There it is. So now it says in balance. If we were to change this one to 2.22, then it says oh, it still says 2.22. If we were to change this one to 2.42, now it says not in balance. All right, those are some built-in functions. All of these are formulas. They just have a function with an equal sign before it. Now let's go over to our next tab. I want to show you that you can mix. You can actually have a function inside of a larger formula. Here we want to calculate net income. Net income is sales minus all the expenses equals this. Notice we have an equal sign, a cell reference, and an operator minus. Now we're going to type SUM and then highlight all these. Close parentheses. So that formula, equal sign, cell reference, operator, and a function. Control Enter. One last topic. There are efficient formulas and non-efficient formulas. Let me show you an efficient formula for adding. Alt equals is the keyboard shortcut for AutoSum. Notice C2 colon C8. Very important. Now let's do a really bad formula. Equals this plus this plus this plus this. You wouldn't believe how many spreadsheets are built just like this. And let me show you why. It's not. In fact, the first day of my accounting job, the accountant gave me a template, and all the addition from the person who worked before me was like this. And I said, hey, can I please make some more efficient formulas? And she said, sure, of course. All right, here's what happens. And I showed her this. I said, watch, if you insert here and put a number right here, 22. This one updates, right, because it had a colon. That's an efficient formula because you can structurally update it, and it will update. But watch this. If I click in this cell and hit F2, which is edit mode, it just totally doesn't have C4 in there. It goes from C5 to C6. Don't do formulas like this. You do it on a test, it's 0. Right? This is inefficient. This is efficient. Just like one other thing, the other major efficiency topic for formulas is when we did our interest rates right here. If you have numbers that vary, they're cell references. Numbers that don't vary, that don't change, are hard-coded in. That's OK. If you were to hard-code in that 18%, that would be very inefficient. All right, when we come back in our next video, we'll talk about a couple more topics to brush up on basics.